Who told you that you could sit in the front row?
I got here first, Mrs. Hadley.
Boy, the only reason you're here is to fill a quota. Get on the floor. You don't get a seat didn't earn.
My GPA is 3.9.
Your GPA is charity. Just like your scholarship. Just like every handout your mother begged for while scrubbing toilets. You'll amount to nothing. You were born nothing. Floor is where nothing belongs.
200 students watched. Nobody spoke. She didn't notice the woman standing outside the open door, but that woman heard every word. And she was the one person who could end Mrs. Hadley's career forever. The cold hit Owen's legs before anything else. The tile floor of Lecture Hall 4B was designed for chair legs and dropped pens, not for a 19-year-old sitting with his back against the wall. He bent his knees at an awkward angle, balanced his notebook on his thigh, and started writing again. His pencil tip snapped against the page. He didn't flinch, just reached into his bag, pulled out another one, and kept going. Every letter pressed deep into the paper like he was carving it into stone. Mrs. Hadley returned to the whiteboard like she'd done nothing more than adjust the thermostat. She drew a bell curve, explained standard deviations, cracked a joke about probability that landed with 3 hollow laughs. The nervous kind. The kind that buys you 1 more hour of invisibility in a room where standing out could cost you everything. A girl in the 3rd row turned around and stared at Owen. Her mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something. She didn't. Owen didn't look up. His left hand gripped the edge of his notebook until his knuckles went pale. But his right hand kept moving, steady, deliberate. This wasn't the first time. 3 weeks ago, Hadley assigned group projects and left Owen without a team. "Nobody wants to work with you," she'd announced to the room. "Perhaps that tells you something about your place here." 2 weeks before that, she'd graded his research paper a D- and scrawled in red ink, "Lacks academic rigor. Consider trade school." Owen Yates had the highest score on the department entrance diagnostic. He was the first person in his family to step inside a university. His mother, Gloria, worked the day shift at Mercy General Hospital, and the night shift cleaning office buildings, 16 hours on her feet so that tuition would never be late again. She called every evening at 9. Owen always picked up, always said the same thing. "Everything's fine, Mom, promise." It was never fine, but he never told her, because one complaint from a tenured professor could mean one phone call to the scholarship board. And one lost scholarship meant everything Gloria Yates had sacrificed. Every double shift, every aching joint, every meal she skipped so he could eat, would be for nothing. So he sat on the floor, and he wrote. 40 feet down the corridor, a woman stood motionless outside the open door. No lanyard, no university ID, a plain navy coat, a leather portfolio, and a coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Dr. Elaine Crawford had been appointed Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences 2 weeks earlier. But before the university published her name, she'd made one request. "Give me time on the ground. Let me see what this place looks like when nobody knows who's watching." They gave her 2 weeks. She arrived that morning listed as a community education consultant, a title so dull nobody would look twice. She hadn't expected to find anything in the first hour. She opened her phone, typed the room number, the time, and 6 words: floor, chair, removed. Amount to nothing. She looked once more at the boy on the cold tile, spine straight, hand steady, still writing, and walked away without a sound. Day 1, room 4B, 1 professor, 1 student on the floor, 9 days left. Owen Yates grew up in Ridgefield Courts, 4 blocks of faded brick apartments where the elevator hadn't worked since before he was born, and the hallway lights flickered like they were counting down to something. His mother, Gloria, had lived there for 22 years. She moved in at 19, pregnant, alone, with a suitcase and $40. Owen's father left before the birth certificate was signed. No note, no forwarding address, just an empty side of the bed and a gap in the story that Owen learned early not to ask about. Gloria never sat down. That was the first thing people noticed about her. She worked the morning shift at Mercy General, 12 hours on her feet, changing bedpans, lifting patients twice her size, smiling at families who never learned her name. When that shift ended, she drove 17 minutes to a commercial cleaning company and spent another 4 hours mopping office floors, wiping conference tables, and emptying trash cans in buildings where people earned in a week what she made in a year. She did this 6 days a week, sometimes 7. Owen remembered the sound of her keys in the door at 2 in the morning, the slow creak of the kitchen chair as she sat down for the first time in 18 hours, the soft hiss of the faucet as she soaked her hands in warm water because her knuckles had cracked again from the cleaning chemicals. He'd lie in bed pretending to sleep, listening. Every sound she made was a reason to keep going. Owen was the first person in his family to graduate high school with honors, the first to take the SAT, the first to receive a letter from a university that wasn't a bill or a rejection. When the partial scholarship came through, tuition covered, room and board on him, Gloria sat at the kitchen table and cried for 40 minutes straight. Not the sad kind. The kind that comes when you've been holding your breath for 19 years and someone finally tells you it's okay to exhale. She drove him to campus in a borrowed car, helped him carry 2 suitcases and a box of books up 3 flights of stairs, stood in his dorm room, 8 feet by 10, cinder block walls, a mattress thinner than her patient's, and said, "This is the beginning, baby. Everything before this was just the warm-up." Owen believed her. His first semester proved it. He finished with a 3.9 GPA, top of his statistics class. His professors, most of them, recognized something sharp in him, a hunger that couldn't be taught, a discipline that came from watching his mother refuse to quit for 2 decades. But not all of them. Mrs. Hadley saw something else when she looked at Owen. She saw the zip code, the skin, the scholarship line on his financial aid form. She saw a boy who, in her mind, had been handed a seat that belonged to someone else. And she made it her mission to remind him, every lecture, every assignment, every cold remark dropped like a match on gasoline, that he didn't belong. Owen never told Gloria. Every evening at 9 she called. Every evening he answered. "How's school, baby?" "It's good, Mom. Classes are hard, but I'm keeping up." "Anyone giving you trouble?" "No, Mom, everyone's nice." He lied because the truth would have broken her. Gloria Yates had given everything, her back, her hands, her sleep, her 20s, her 30s, so her son could sit in a chair in a lecture hall. If she found out that someone had put him on the floor, she would have driven 4 hours in that borrowed car and torn the building apart with her bare hands. And then she would have lost her job, missed a shift, fallen behind on rent. Owen understood the math, so he sat on the floor, took the D-, worked alone on every group project, and kept his mouth shut. The floor was cold, but it was cheaper than the truth. Dr. Elaine Crawford had spent 20 years cleaning up other people's messes. Not the kind Gloria Yates cleaned, the institutional kind. The kind that hid behind tenure policies and alumni donations and mission statements printed on glossy brochures that nobody actually read. The kind that let a professor humiliate students for a decade because firing her would mean a lawsuit, and a lawsuit would mean bad press, and bad press would mean fewer applications next fall. Elaine knew the playbook because she'd written the counter playbook. Before academia, she'd been a civil rights attorney in Philadelphia. 12 years in courtrooms where the odds were stacked so high against her clients that most lawyers wouldn't even take the meetings. She took them all, won most, lost some, but every case left the same scar and taught her the same lesson. The people doing the damage never think they're the villain. They think they're maintaining standards. They sleep fine at night. She left law at 41, not because she'd lost the fire, because she realized the courtroom was the last stop. By the time a case reached her desk, the harm was already done. The student had already dropped out. The employee had already been fired. The family had already been broken apart. She wanted to get upstream, find the rot before it reached the courtroom. So she went into education reform, and she was brutal at it. 3 universities in 7 years. Each one handed to her like a building on fire. Each one she rebuilt from the inside. New hiring standards, mandatory bias training, transparent grading audits, anonymous student reporting systems. The faculty unions hated her, the boards feared her, the students loved her, and the schools she left behind were better for the bleeding. When Whitmore University offered her the dean position for the College of Arts and Sciences, she almost said no. She was tired. 53 years old, divorced, 2 grown daughters who joked that their mother had more universities than relationships. Her back ached from years of sitting in hard courtroom chairs. Her reading glasses were thicker than they used to be. She had earned the right to rest. But then she read the internal reports. 14 formal complaints in 3 years, all from students of color, all in the same department, all naming the same professor, and all of them closed with the same rubber-stamped line: insufficient evidence to proceed. 14 complaints, 0 consequences, 1 professor untouched. Elaine said yes the next morning, but she added one condition. No announcement for 2 weeks, no press release, no faculty email introducing the new dean. She wanted to walk those hallways as nobody, sit in the cafeteria as nobody, attend lectures as nobody. She wanted to see the place without its makeup on. The board hesitated. The university president pushed back. "It's unconventional," he said. "So is letting a professor run a department like a plantation," she replied. They gave her the 2 weeks. She arrived on a Monday morning in early September. Plain navy coat, no lanyard, no university ID badge visible. She'd listed herself in the visitor system as Dr. E. Crawford, Community Education Consultant. A title so aggressively boring that the security guard barely glanced at her sign-in. She spent the first 3 hours walking, learning the rhythm of the campus. Which buildings buzzed with energy, which ones felt hollow, where the students gathered between classes, where they scattered. She sat in the cafeteria and listened to conversations, visited the library, noticed which study rooms were full and which sat dark. She read the bulletin boards, the bathroom graffiti, the anonymous posts on the student forum. By lunchtime, she had a feel for the place. A good science building, a strong athletics program, a music department that punched above its weight, and a college of arts and sciences that ran on fear disguised as tradition. Then she walked into Building C, 4th floor, Lecture Hall 4B. She heard the chair hit the tile before she reached the door. She heard quota. She heard charity. She heard scrubbing toilets. She heard you'll amount to nothing. And she stood there, a black woman in a plain coat, invisible to everyone inside that room, and listened to another black woman's son be told he was born worthless. She didn't introduce herself, didn't storm in, didn't slam her portfolio on the podium and announce who she was. She just opened her phone, typed 6 words, and walked away. Elaine Crawford had cleaned up buildings on fire before. This one she was going to dismantle brick by brick. The next morning, Dr. Crawford requested permission to sit in on Mrs. Hadley's advanced statistics lecture. She used her consultant cover, evaluating teaching methodology across departments, standard quality assurance review, nothing to worry about. Hadley didn't just agree, she welcomed it. "Finally," she told the department secretary loud enough for 3 offices to hear. "Someone from the outside who can see how a real classroom should be run. I've been asking for recognition for years." She even wore a new blazer. Crawford arrived 10 minutes early and took a seat in the back row, far left corner, behind a concrete pillar where she could see the entire room without being the center of it. She placed her portfolio on the fold-out desk, opened a fresh page, and wrote the date at the top. The students filed in. Owen Yates walked through the door at exactly 8:58. He didn't sit in the front row this time. He chose the 3rd row, middle seat. A small retreat that nobody noticed except the woman in the back corner who understood exactly what it meant. Hadley started the lecture at 9:01. For the first 20 minutes, she was good. Better than good, she was sharp. Her explanation of regression analysis was clear, well-structured, and genuinely engaging. She moved across the front of the room with the confidence of someone who had owned that space for 2 decades. Crawford wrote in her notebook, "Strong content delivery, knows her material." Then she called on Owen. Mr. Yates, since you seem to think your GPA entitles you to opinions, explain multicollinearity to the class. Owen stood. Multicollinearity occurs when two or more independent variables in a regression model are highly correlated, which makes it difficult to isolate the individual effect of each variable on the dependent. Sit down. Owen paused. I said sit down. You're reading a textbook definition like a parrot. Anyone can memorize. I asked you to explain. I was explaining. You were reciting. There's a difference. But I wouldn't expect you to know that. She turned to the class. Can someone who actually understands the concept help us out? A white student in the second row raised his hand and gave almost the exact same answer. Hadley nodded. Good, clear, concise. See, Mr. Yates? That's what understanding sounds like. Owen sat down. His jaw tightened. His pen didn't move for a full 30 seconds. Crawford's hand gripped her own pen so hard the cap cracked. The lecture continued. Hadley assigned a group case study. 4 students per team, analyzing a data set on income inequality. She read the groups aloud from a printed list. Every name was called, except one. Mrs. Hadley, Owen said, I don't have a group. Hadley looked at her list, then at him, then back at the list as if she were checking for a misprint she already knew wasn't there. It seems we have an odd number this semester. You'll work alone, Mr. Yates. Submit the same deliverables as the groups. Same deadline. That's 4 people's work. Then I suggest you start early. She smiled. Unless you'd like to withdraw from the course, that's always an option. The room went quiet. Not the shocked silence from the day before. This was the practiced silence of people who had learned that looking away was safer than looking up. Owen pulled out his laptop and opened a blank document. He didn't argue, didn't raise his hand again, didn't look at anyone. Crawford closed her notebook. After class, she waited in the hallway. She watched students stream out, some laughing, some checking phones, all of them moving on with their day like nothing had happened. Then Owen came out, last one through the door, backpack over one shoulder, eyes straight ahead. She stepped into his path, not blocking, just present. Excuse me, I'm part of the education consulting team visiting campus this week. She extended her hand. Elaine. Owen shook it, firm grip, tired eyes. Owen, how's the semester going for you? He looked at her for a long moment, measuring, deciding. Then he said what he'd trained himself to say. I'm used to it. 3 words, delivered flat, like a door closing. Crawford watched him walk away down the corridor. His footsteps echoed against the tile, steady, even, unhurried. The walk of someone who had been carrying weight so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. She opened her phone and added a second entry below the first. Day 2, same class, public humiliation, isolated from peers, grading bias, student response, resignation. Then she typed one more line. He said, I'm used to it. That's the worst part. On day 3, Elaine Crawford stopped observing and started hunting. She'd seen enough in 2 lectures to know this wasn't a personality conflict or a tough love teaching style that rubbed one student the wrong way. This was a pattern, systematic, practiced, the kind of behavior that doesn't develop overnight. It calcifies over years, protected by silence and institutional cowardice. She needed evidence, not the kind that lives in feelings and anecdotes, the kind that survives a tenure review board, a faculty union grievance, and, if it came to it, a courtroom. She started with the students. On Wednesday afternoon, she booked a small conference room in the Student Services building and posted a notice on the department bulletin board. Education Quality Review, confidential student feedback sessions. All participants anonymous. No faculty present. The first student arrived at 2:15. A sophomore named Priya Dawson, biracial, financial aid. She sat down, looked at her hands for a full minute, and then talked for 45. Hadley had called her a diversity brochure come to life in front of the class during her second week. When Priya filed a complaint with the department, The chair called her in and explained that Mrs. Hadley had a direct communication style, and that perhaps the comment was taken out of context. The complaint was closed within 72 hours. Priya never filed another one. The second student came at 3 o'clock. A junior named Deshaun Brooks, black, pre-law. Hadley had failed him on a midterm despite his answer sheet matching the solution key almost word for word. When he went to her office to dispute the grade, she told him, "If I pass everyone who looks like you, this degree won't mean anything." He transferred out of her section the next semester. His replacement professor gave him an A on the same material. By 5 o'clock, Crawford had spoken to 12 students. 9 of them were black or Latino. All 9 had stories. Some were subtle, a comment here, a look there, a grade that didn't match the work. Some were brutal. One student described being told to go back to community college where the standards match your kind. Another described Hadley refusing to write a recommendation letter because it wouldn't be honest. 3 students were white. 2 said they'd noticed Hadley treating minority students differently, but didn't feel it was their place to speak up. The third, a senior named Beth Winters, broke down in tears. "I knew what she was doing, everyone knew, I didn't want to be the one who made trouble." Crawford didn't judge her. She wrote it down. On Thursday, she went to campus security and requested access to the lecture hall surveillance footage. Her consultant credentials got her through the door. The security officer, a bored 20-something who spent most of his shift watching Netflix on a second monitor, pulled up the recordings without asking questions. Crawford sat in that windowless room for 6 hours. She reviewed 3 weeks of footage from Lecture Hall 4B. She found what she was looking for almost immediately. September 4th. Hadley moves Owen's backpack from a desk to the floor, tells him to stop cluttering up spaces that aren't yours. September 11th. Hadley hands back graded papers to every student individually. She drops Owens on the floor and keeps walking. September 18th. The chair incident. The one Crawford witnessed herself. Time-stamped, recorded, Hadley's words perfectly audible on the ceiling microphone. She copied the files onto a secure drive and returned the originals. On Friday, she called 2 people. The first was the university's legal counsel. She asked a single question. What's the threshold for terminating a tenured professor for discriminatory conduct? He gave her a number. She was already past it. The second call was to her former law partner in Philadelphia. "I need you to review something for me. Not a case. Not yet. Just tell me if what I have would hold." Her partner listened, then laughed. "Elaine, what you have would hold in any court in America. The question isn't whether you can fire her. The question is why she hasn't been fired already." Crawford knew the answer to that question. She'd known it her entire career. Some people are protected not because they're innocent, but because removing them would require someone with authority to admit the institution failed. And institutions hate admitting they failed. She spent Saturday organizing the file. Video, transcripts, student testimony, grade comparisons. Owen's work side by side with white students who received higher marks for lower quality. Complaint records showing 14 filings, 14 closures, 0 investigations. By Sunday night, the file was 2 inches thick. She set it on her hotel desk, poured a glass of wine, and stared at it. 9 student stories, 1 professor's career, 20 years of unchecked cruelty. Monday was the faculty meeting. She'd requested a 5-minute slot on the agenda under her consultant cover, preliminary observations from the quality review. 5 minutes was all she needed, but she wasn't going to use them yet, not until she saw one more thing. The midterm presentations were scheduled for Thursday of the second week. Owen had spent 4 days on his, not because the assignment required it, because he wanted it to be untouchable. He wanted to build something so thorough, so meticulously researched, so clearly argued that even Hadley couldn't find a crack to slip her knife into. He chose his topic carefully. The statistical legacy of redlining. How housing discrimination shaped modern income inequality. It was personal without being sentimental. It used the same regression models Hadley had taught in class, her own tools turned into a mirror. He rehearsed it 11 times in his dorm room, timed it to the second, checked every citation twice, printed backup slides in case the projector failed. He even ironed his shirt, the only button-down he owned, the one Gloria had bought him the day before move-in. Thursday morning, Lecture Hall 4B. 23 students presenting in alphabetical order. Owen Yates, second to last. He sat through 2 hours of presentations. Some were good, some were mediocre. One student read directly from index cards without looking up once. Hadley gave him a B+. Then Owen's name was called. He walked to the front, connected his laptop, took a breath, and delivered the best presentation that room had heard all semester. His voice was steady. His data was airtight. He walked the class through 70 years of housing policy with the clarity of someone who didn't just study the numbers, he'd grown up inside them. Ridgefield Courts wasn't in his slides, but it was in every sentence. The zip codes, the lending patterns, the wealth gaps that compounded generation after generation while people called it choice. When he finished, the room was quiet. Not the uncomfortable silence he was used to, a different kind, the kind that follows something real. 2 students in the back row started clapping, then a third, then half the room. Hadley didn't clap. She waited until the applause died. Then she pulled out her grading sheet and wrote for 30 seconds. She didn't look at Owen, didn't acknowledge the response from the class, just wrote. "Thank you, Mr. Yates. Next." Owen returned to his seat. His hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the adrenaline of having done everything right and knowing it still might not matter. The grades were posted online that evening. Owen refreshed the page at 9:47 p.m. His presentation score loaded in the column next to his name. D. Not D+, not D-, just D. The kind of grade that says, "I could have given you an F, but I wanted you to know I was being generous." Below the score was a comment from Hadley. Presentation lacked academic rigor. Topic selection was emotionally driven rather than analytically sound. Recommend focusing on core statistical methods rather than social commentary. Perhaps trade school offers programs better suited to this approach. Owen stared at the screen for a long time. He closed the laptop, sat on the edge of his bed, pulled out his phone, and almost called his mother. His thumb hovered over her name for 10 seconds. Then he put the phone face down on the mattress. He picked up his backpack, walked out of the dorm, and crossed the dark campus to a bench near the library. The one under the old oak tree where nobody went after 9 because the lights didn't reach that far. He sat there in the dark for 2 hours. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore, Owen Yates thought about leaving. Not transferring, leaving. Packing his 2 suitcases and his box of books, driving back to Ridgefield Courts and telling his mother it just didn't work out. She'd understand. She'd hold him. She'd say it wasn't his fault, and they'd both pretend the dream hadn't died on a cold tile floor in room 4B. Dr. Crawford found out about the grade the next morning. She'd requested access to the department's grading portal as part of her quality review. When she pulled Owen's file, she saw the D. Then she read the presentation file attached to his submission. She read it twice. Then she opened her own notebook and flipped to her notes from Thursday's session. She'd been in the room, back corner, behind the pillar. She had watched Owen deliver that presentation. She had watched the class respond. She wrote one line in the margin of her file. "This is A-level work." It received a D. This is no longer a pattern. This is persecution. She picked up her phone and called the university president's office. "I'm ready," she said. "Schedule the assembly." Owen almost didn't go to class on Friday. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while his alarm buzzed 3 times. His backpack sat by the door, already packed from the night before, a habit his mother had drilled into him since middle school. "Be ready before the world gives you a reason not to be," she always said. He turned off the alarm, stared at the ceiling some more. Then he thought about Gloria, about the way her knees cracked when she stood up after a 12-hour shift, about how she never once called in sick because sick days meant short checks and short checks meant late rent. He got up, put on his shoes, picked up the backpack, walked to class. Hadley was already mid-lecture when he slipped in through the back door. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his existence at all. Owen took a seat in the last row and opened his notebook. After class, Crawford was waiting in the hallway. Same plain coat, same portfolio. She was leaning against the wall like she just happened to be there, but Owen had noticed her before. The consultant who showed up everywhere, who sat in the back of Hadley's lectures with a face that gave away nothing. "Owen, how's the week been?" He stopped, looked at her. The answer sat right behind his teeth. The D, the bench, the 2 hours in the dark, the suitcase he'd pulled out from under his bed and then shoved back. "Rough," he said. First honest word he'd spoken to anyone on this campus in weeks. Crawford nodded. She didn't push, didn't ask what happened, just said, "Can I show you something?" She walked him to a quiet corner of the student commons, pulled out her phone and showed him a photograph, not from the investigation. A photograph of a girl, maybe 16, standing in front of a school with a backpack that was taped together at the strap. "That's me," Crawford said. 16 years old. Camden, New Jersey. My guidance counselor told my mother I wasn't college material. Said I should focus on something more. His word was realistic. Owen looked at the photo, then at her. "I went to college anyway, then law school. Then I spent 12 years suing institutions that told kids like us what we couldn't be." She put the phone away. "I'm not telling you this so you feel better. I'm telling you because the people who try to break you are always the ones most afraid of what you'll become. And that fear? That's the only honest thing they've ever shown you." Owen didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "She gave me a D on my midterm presentation." "I know. It was good work." "I know that too." He searched her face. "How?" "Because I was in the room, Owen. 3rd row from the back. I watched every second of it." Something shifted in his eyes. Not hope, not yet, but the absence of the thing that had been sitting on his chest since Thursday night. The weight didn't disappear. It just loosened, enough for him to take a full breath. "What do I do?" he asked. "You keep going," she said. "You keep showing up. You keep doing the work, and you trust that the right people are paying attention." Owen nodded slowly. "Are they?" Crawford picked up her portfolio. "More than you think." That evening, Owen went back to his dorm and opened his laptop. He pulled up the group case study, the one he'd been assigned to do alone. He worked on it until 2 in the morning, not because he believed the grade would be fair, because he refused to give Hadley the one thing she wanted most, his absence. Across campus, something else was forming. It started with Priya Dawson texting Deshaun Brooks. "Did you talk to that consultant woman too?" Deshaun replied, "Yeah, she actually listened." By midnight, 8 students had found each other in a group chat. No name for it, no leader, just 8 people who had all been told in different ways that they didn't belong, and who were starting to realize they weren't alone. Owen didn't know about the group chat yet, but he would. And when the time came, they wouldn't just be witnesses. They'd be proof. The all-department assembly was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m., Whitmore Auditorium. The big one, the one they used for graduation ceremonies and donor events. 500 seats arranged in a half-circle around a raised stage with a wooden podium and a projection screen the size of a garage door. By 1:30, the room was full. Faculty sat in the first 3 rows. 47 professors, 12 department chairs, and the outgoing associate dean who'd spent 3 years ignoring every complaint that crossed his desk. Behind them sat the graduate teaching assistants, then the undergraduate students, then a scattering of parents who'd received a last-minute invitation from the provost's office. Owen sat in the back row, far right, near the exit. He hadn't planned on coming. Deshaun Brooks had texted him that morning. "You need to be there." No explanation, just that. Priya Dawson sat 6 rows ahead of him. She was sitting perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight at the stage. The 8 students from the group chat were scattered across the auditorium. They hadn't coordinated seats. They didn't need to. They just showed up. Mrs. Hadley sat in the front row, center section. She was wearing the blazer she saved for important occasions. Dark navy, brass buttons, a silk scarf tucked at the collar. She had a folder on her lap and a pen in her hand. She was smiling. She'd been invited to give the keynote address on teaching excellence. 20 Years of Standards. That was the title she'd submitted. She'd spent a week on the speech, practiced it in front of her bathroom mirror. She genuinely believed this assembly had been organized to recognize her. At 2 o'clock, the provost opened with a brief welcome. Budget updates, new building plans, a mention of the upcoming accreditation review. Standard bureaucratic throat-clearing that made half the room check their phones. Then he said, "I'd like to invite our featured speaker for today, a professor who has shaped this department for 2 decades, Mrs. Catherine Hadley." Applause. Polite, measured, the kind that comes from obligation rather than enthusiasm. Hadley rose, smoothed her blazer, walked to the podium with the measured pace of a woman who had stood behind lecterns her entire adult life. She adjusted the microphone, opened her folder, and began. "Thank you. It's an honor to be here today, though I'll admit recognition is long overdue." Light laughter from the faculty section. "For 20 years, I've held this department to a standard that many find uncomfortable. Real education isn't about making students feel good. It's about preparing them for a world that doesn't care about their feelings. Some students rise to meet that standard. Others, and I say this with compassion, simply aren't equipped." She paused for effect. Let the weight of the words sit. "My job is not to lower the bar. My job is to tell the truth. And sometimes the truth is that not everyone belongs in this room." Owen felt his stomach tighten. He looked at the floor. Hadley continued for another 4 minutes. She talked about grade inflation, about the participation trophy generation, about how universities had become more concerned with diversity metrics than academic excellence. She never named a student. She never named a race. But everyone in that room, especially the ones who'd sat in her class, understood exactly who she was talking about. When she finished, she closed her folder, smiled at the audience, and said, "I welcome any questions." The provost stood. But before he could speak, a voice came from the left side of the front row. "I have a few." Hadley turned. The woman in the plain navy coat was already standing. She carried a leather portfolio in one hand and a small remote control in the other. She walked toward the stage, not rushing, not hesitating, with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this moment in courtrooms for 12 years. Hadley frowned. "I'm sorry, the floor hasn't been opened yet." "It has now." The provost didn't intervene. He sat down. He already knew. The woman stepped onto the stage, walked past Hadley, and stopped at the podium. She set her portfolio down and looked out at 500 faces. "My name is Dr. Elaine Crawford," she said, "and as of 2 weeks ago, I am the new dean of the College of Arts and Sciences." The room went dead silent. Hadley's smile disappeared. "I wasn't here to evaluate your teaching methods, Mrs. Hadley." Crawford's voice was steady, clear, and sharp enough to cut glass. "I was here to see what this department does when it thinks nobody important is watching." She pressed the remote. The screen behind her lit up. "Let me show you what I found." The first image on the screen was the surveillance footage from September 18th. No introduction, no preamble, just the video. Crisp, wide-angle, ceiling microphone capturing every word in Lecture Hall 4B. 500 people watched Mrs. Hadley grab Owen Yates's chair and shove it across the tile. Watched him catch himself with one palm on the cold floor. Watched her lean down and say, "You'll amount to nothing. You were born nothing. Floor is where nothing belongs." The audio echoed through the auditorium speakers, every syllable amplified. In the front row, Hadley's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Crawford let the video play to its end. The silence in the lecture hall, 200 students frozen, Owen sitting on the floor with his notebook on his thigh, still writing. Then she pressed the remote. September 4th. A new clip. Hadley pulling Owen's backpack off a desk and dropping it on the floor. "Stop cluttering up spaces that aren't yours." Click. September 11th. Hadley returning graded papers to every student by hand. When she reached Owen's desk, she dropped his paper on the floor without breaking stride. Click. September 25th. Owen delivering his midterm presentation on the statistical legacy of redlining. The class responding with genuine applause. then the grading screen. D. Crawford turned to face the audience. I asked 2 independent faculty members from the statistics department to review this presentation blindly. No name attached. Both graded it A- or higher. She pressed the remote one more time. The screen split into 2 columns. Left, Owen's work, papers, exams, presentations. Right, the grades Hadley had given him. Beside each, Crawford placed the grade given to a white student whose work she'd pulled from the same assignments. The pattern was undeniable. Owen's research paper, D-, sat next to a white student's paper with fewer citations, a weaker thesis, and 2 uncorrected factual errors. That paper received a B+. Owen's exam, marked with deductions for unclear reasoning, sat next to an exam with nearly identical answers and no deductions. A-. Same quality, different skin, different grade. Every pair told the same story. Crawford set down the remote. Over the past 2 weeks, I conducted confidential interviews with 12 current and former students in this department. 9 of them described experiences consistent with discriminatory treatment by Mrs. Hadley. She opened her portfolio and placed a single sheet on the podium. I also reviewed the department's complaint records. In 3 years, 14 formal complaints have been filed against Mrs. Hadley. All 14 were closed without investigation. All 14 involved students of color. She looked directly at Hadley. 14 families trusted this university to protect their children. 14 times, this institution chose to protect itself instead. Hadley stood. Her chair scraped against the floor, the same sound her heel had made against Owen's chair 3 weeks ago. This is outrageous. I have tenure. I have 20 years of service. You can't come in here and ambush me with edited footage and disgruntled students who couldn't handle rigorous— Mrs. Hadley. Crawford's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You had 20 years to speak. You used them to tell a 19-year-old boy that he was born nothing. I'm going to ask you to sit down. And for the first time in your career, you're going to listen. Hadley looked to her colleagues in the faculty section. Not one met her eyes. She sat down. Crawford turned back to the audience. Effective immediately, Mrs. Catherine Hadley is suspended from all teaching duties pending a full review by the University Disciplinary Board. Her access to student records, grading systems, and campus facilities will be revoked by end of day. She paused, looked toward the back of the auditorium. Mr. Yates. Owen looked up. Every head in the room turned toward him. Your presentation on the statistical legacy of redlining was one of the most well-researched pieces of undergraduate work I've read in 30 years of education. It deserved an A. And as of this moment, your academic record will be reviewed and corrected by an independent faculty panel. Owen didn't stand, didn't speak. His eyes filled, and he pressed his lips together hard enough to turn them white. A single tear ran down his left cheek. He wiped it with the back of his hand, fast, almost angry, like he didn't want anyone to see. But everyone saw. Priya Dawson started clapping. Then Deshaun Brooks. Then the 8 from the group chat. Then the girl from the 3rd row who had never spoken up when it mattered but was speaking now. The applause built until it filled every corner of the auditorium. 500 people standing. 500 people finally making the noise they should have made a long time ago. Crawford stood at the podium and let it happen. She didn't smile, didn't raise her fist. She just watched, a black woman standing in the light that a black boy had been denied, and let the sound wash over the room like something that had been locked away for 20 years, finally breaking free. 3 months later, Mrs. Catherine Hadley's nameplate was removed from the door of her office on the 4th floor of Building C. The disciplinary board's decision was unanimous. 23 years of tenure dissolved in a single afternoon. The hearing lasted 4 hours. The deliberation lasted 12 minutes. Hadley stood without a word, picked up her purse, and walked out of the building. She didn't look back. Not one colleague reached out afterward. Not one. Owen found out from an email at 6:14 in the morning, still in the clothes he'd slept in. A university staffing update. 3 paragraphs of institutional language that meant one thing. She was gone. He sat on the edge of his bed and felt something he hadn't felt since his scholarship letter arrived. The ground beneath him was solid. The grade corrections came a week later. Every assignment Hadley had touched was re-evaluated by an independent panel. His research paper went from D- to A. His midterm presentation from D to A-. His final course grade? A. His GPA climbed to 4.0, first in the department. The kid who'd been sitting on the floor now had the highest standing in the building. Dr. Crawford called him into her office, her real office now, with her name on the door and diplomas on the wall. She told him about a new scholarship fund she'd established through the university's diversity office. Full tuition, full room and board, books covered. Named not after a donor or a building, but after what it was meant to protect, the Whitmore Student Dignity Fund. Owen was the first recipient. He called his mother that night. For the first time in 4 months, he didn't lie. He told her everything. The chair, the floor, the D grades, the amount to nothing. The bench in the dark, the suitcase he'd pulled out and then shoved back. Every piece he'd been holding behind his teeth since September. Gloria was quiet for a long time. "Baby, you sat on that floor so I wouldn't have to worry. But I'm your mama. Worrying about you is the only job I never clocked out of." She drove up that weekend, 4 hours in the borrowed car. Walked into Owen's dorm, saw the 4.0 transcript pinned above his desk, and sat on the edge of his bed without saying a word. She just held his hand. They stayed like that for 20 minutes. Neither of them needed to speak. By the end of the semester, Owen was elected student representative on the university's newly formed Teaching Quality Review Board, the first undergraduate in Whitmore's history to hold a vote on faculty evaluations. Priya Dawson joined as graduate representative. Deshaun Brooks enrolled in law school the following fall. The group chat never got a name. It didn't need one. It became a precedent. An anonymous student reporting system, modeled on Crawford's interview process, was implemented across all departments. Complaints could no longer be filed and forgotten. Everyone required a response within 30 days. Everyone was tracked. On the last day of the semester, Owen walked past Lecture Hall 4B. The door was open. The room was empty. He stepped inside. Same tile floor. Same baseboard heater. Same wall he'd pressed his back against while 200 people pretended not to see him. He stood there for a full minute. Then he walked to the front row, pulled out a chair, and sat down. Nobody told him he couldn't. If this story hit you, drop a comment. What would you have done if you were sitting in that lecture hall? Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like Owen's deserve to be told, and they deserve to be heard.
Owen sat on the floor, not because he believed what Hadley said, because he knew what his mother had sacrificed to put him there, and he refused to waste a single hour of it. 14 complaints in 3 years, 14 families who trusted that institution, and 14 times the system chose its own comfort over a student's dignity. That's what silence does. It doesn't just protect the person doing harm, it becomes the harm. But here's what Hadley never understood. You don't measure someone's worth by when they sit. You measure it by what they do when the world tells them to stop. Owen had every reason to leave. Instead, he opened his laptop and kept working. Not because the grade would be fair, but because his absence was the only thing she actually wanted. So here's what I want you to sit with tonight. If dignity has to be earned, who gets to decide the price? And when does protecting your own comfort become the same thing as holding someone down? And the question nobody wants to answer: how many Owens have you walked past without stopping? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one. If this story reminded you of someone fighting a battle nobody sees, send it to them. Hit subscribe. Silence is cheap, but showing up changes everything.